Bigger, badder, and just plain better, The Lord of the Rings Return of the King is everything that Two Towers wanted to be, everything that a sequel should be, and everything that a license-based game ought to be. Other franchises, take notes. While not completely flawless, I mean, come on, this is a 6th gen game after all. Return of the King starts strong with an opening narration by Ian McKellen, Gandalf himself, as he sets the stage.
At dawn, look to the east. For a wizard is never late, nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he needs to.
Picking up right where the Two Towers left off, which, hey, if you didn't catch my review on that game, now's the time. In the second half of the Battle of Helm's Deep, as the White Wizard leads the Riders of Rohan charging in the battle. Now that is how you start an action game. And even if you haven't played the previous game, or seen any of the movies, don't worry, the first time I played this game, I had never even heard of The Lord of the Rings before. That's right, a license-based game was my introduction to the franchise. As if there was any other way. What the hell's a book? Yeah, we can revisit that later, because right now, we have got a horde of orcs to slay, as this opening battle also acts as the game's tutorial for those starting their journey here, introducing the basic mechanics as well as a few new ones. Return of the King, like its father before it, is a hack-and-slash action-adventure game. Hordes, and I mean hordes, of enemies will stand between you and destroying the One Ring. To rule them all! And unlike in Two Towers, this time around, it actually feels like you've got all the tools you need to get the job done. You're packing fast slashes, shield-shattering heavy attacks, multi-combo attacks, devastating insta-kill parries, projectiles, blocking, and finishing blows, with more unlocking as you level each character up. And this time around, they even added in special abilities. Plus, now you have an even larger arsenal at your disposal with a bigger fellowship to wield it. Though, it is worth noting that all of the characters kinda play the same. And of course, there are some differences, like some attack faster, others do more damage, others take less damage, etc, etc. But they all mostly have the same moves, so they all feel really similar. The only other new major mechanic this game introduces is interactive objects. And while not groundbreaking by any means, there is just something satisfying about impaling orcs and ogres with burning spears or giving them a molten shower. Toasty! You know, I think I might be a violent person. Also returning to reward your epic killing sprees is the excellent experience system. Taking down more foes and pulling off longer strings of combos will help to raise the gauge by your character's name. The higher it is, the more experience you receive for each kill, adding an element of danger and skill to the mix. As combos and finishers will definitely leave you more open to attack than say just hammering the speed attack, which to be fair is a legit strategy and is a great way to attack and block at the same time. But it just won't reward you as handsomely. Unless, of course, you utilize those special abilities I mentioned earlier. The main fighter trio, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, can basically enter a state that increases the value of their hits and combos, pretty much guaranteeing higher scores. Gandalf gets an energy shield, awesome, which not only protects you, but can also boost your score as you can just ram dudes and it counts as hitting them. And the hobbits, they get invisibility, which doesn't really help that much with boosting, but obviously has other uses. Now, getting past the tutorial stage, the game actually opens up by presenting 3 paths for you to follow. The path of the Fellowship, the path of the Wizard, and the path of the Hobbit. That is, unless you have a second controller plugged in. Oh yeah, and what is easily the game's biggest improvement over Two Towers is that it is 2-player co-op.
Mr. Frodo's not going anywhere without me.
Which, interestingly enough, even back in 2003, dial-up era, was apparently available online for the PS2 only. This thing can connect to the internet? Seriously though, shout out to anyone who ever played this online. So playing co-op actually forgoes the Battle of Helm's Deep as well as the path selection option. which just looks awesome by the way, forcing you down the center path first, the Path of the Fellowship, where you can choose between Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. And just look at how they unmassacred my boy. Yeah, despite being released only a single year after Two Towers, in terms of looks, Return of the King has put aside the Ranger and become the king it was always meant to be.
It looks good for a 6th gen game.
Return of the King really knows how to set the stage with sweeping shots, tense atmosphere, and epic set pieces. Clearly, it's trying to give the movie a run for its money, despite the obvious limitations of the time. Even the more low-key aspects of the levels look better as the stages are simply brighter. The monsters, especially the trolls, look much more threatening. And way less derpy. And of course, the character models, especially the faces, have been vastly improved upon, coming way closer to the likeness of the actors. But let's be fair to the Two Towers for a second, as all of this really isn't that surprising when you really stop to think about it. Most license-based games, especially the movie ones, tend to just be crapped out as fast as possible in order to launch alongside the film, which usually got at least 3 to 4 more years of development time.
My mind is blown! It's almost as if there's a correlation between development time and quality. Who would have guessed?
Return of the King, however, released on PS2, Xbox, GameCube, and PC just 1 year after Two Towers, in 2003, and had the advantage of being able to take that foundation and just run with it, improving on pretty much everything. The only thing that's about the same quality is the audio, which, let's face it, when you're already at the top, can you really go any higher? The music is still just as epic as ever, with award-winning cinematic scores that just take everything up to the next level. Let's be real here, a few levels. How can you not feel like an absolute badass cutting down orcs as this score plays? And the music isn't all the audio boasts either. Once again, the actors from the movies return to lend their vocal talents, further blurring the line between game and film. Something it takes literally too, as the cutscenes look fantastic, way cleaner than Two Towers. I genuinely wish more license-based games did this. Though it does bring up a few other important points that we need to hit upon. Basically, the changes to the story. As I said earlier, this was my introduction to The Lord of the Rings, and I think it does a great job of telling a compelling story with just the third movie elements. But purists might be upset to find that the White Wizard is retelling history.
Whenever you notice something like that, a wizard did it.
Particularly the ending, as it's been changed just a bit. Not much, just a few elements, like who is this guy? And doesn't him showing off Frodo's mithril shirt kinda defeat the point of the final stand? I don't know. Maybe it's because the movie hadn't actually been released yet when this game came out, and they just didn't know for sure how it actually ends.
Is this the book you all keep talking about? Because I'm not too sure about this one, guys.
And that's not the only change, assuming you're playing on co-op, as you'll eventually unlock the Path of the Wizard, allowing you to play through Gandalf's story, and the Path of the Hobbit, allowing you to play through Sam's. And both alongside another member of the Fellowship, who clearly isn't supposed to be there. Obviously, this is all for gameplay's sake, with a nice touch being that once you've beaten the game, you can take any character down any path. Now, Undead, you face the wrath of Mr. Frodo. Plus, as you go, you unlock more actor interviews and behind the scenes, just like in Two Towers, which is still pretty cool, as you just don't see much of that anymore.
I've actually made the controller float, and without touching anything, I've managed to play the game. It's only happened a few times,
But unfortunately, that's not the only thing that returns from Two Towers. Now, Return of the King is definitely a major improvement. The boss fights don't suck this time, the enemies are smarter and there are way more of them, you can attack shielded foes from behind without being blocked, enemies don't feel so one note, and best of all, they got rid of a lot of the escort style missions. But not all of them. There's still a few stages that are all about reaching objective points or else it's game over, like protecting Merry and Arwen. Now, gameplay variety is usually a plus, but these kind of stages are definitely hindered by the game's greatest foe, the camera.
Cast it into the fire!
We're dealing with a fixed third-person camera here, which, trust me, does us no favors. It can be obnoxiously hard to see where you need to go. Like, just finding paths can be a chore, which goes doubly so in more open areas, ironically enough. And it is completely and utterly unfair when you're on a time limit and you can't see where to go next. Plus, the camera just cuts, changing on you whenever you enter a certain area. That's just annoying. But if that isn't bad enough, the enemies can actually pop shot you from off screen. How cheap is that? Or when the camera's running with you and they just run on screen and smack you before you even have a chance to react? Or worst of all, the camera cuts back to you after playing a small cutscene, only to have the enemies already attacking you. All of which can lead to some pretty unnecessary, and let's be real here, pretty unfair deaths. But at the very least, the game is pretty generous with the health drops, so it's really not that much of a deal breaker. Nothing that couldn't be fixed with a remake. That's probably never going to happen due to licensing.
There never was much hope. Just a fool's hope.
Because, as is, most of the game's biggest shortcomings, aside from the camera, really is just minor jank of the era. Nothing that gaming vets or nostalgia glasses couldn't look past. With amazing music, hordes of enemies to slay, a rewarding EXP system, cool cinematics, great unlockables, 2-player co-op, and just vast improvements over its predecessor, Lord of the Rings Return of the King wears the crown for what sequels and license-based games should be. If you fancy yourself a fan of Lord of the Rings, hack-and-slash action games, co-op adventures, and just aren't afraid of the hiccups of the time, then Lord of the Rings Return of the King is absolutely worth it. It comes highly recommended.